Good day, class. We're going to continue on working with the bouncing ball. We're going to start making it into a handball game, kind of like a one-player Pong game. So there's a lot to cover here. I might break it up into two videos. Today, what we're going to do is, in this video, we're going to uh, make the border of the drawing area visible. We're going to set the size of the area to a number of pixels wide by and pixels high. Then we're going to draw a paddle. And then we're going to use key mapping so that we can use keys on the keyboard to move the paddle up and down. To begin with, we need to add some additional libraries. Specifically, we need to add key adapter and key event. Those are libraries that have code in them that let us track the keys that are being pressed on the keyboard and then deal with those keys. We're also going to put in mouse event because when we click out of the game and into the other panel where the sliders are, we lose focus on the game, which means that when you try and play again, you won't be able to move the paddle. So we have to use the mouse event to know when we move the mouse back into the drawing area so that your program knows that you're now back in playing mode and that when you use the keys on the keyboard, it will move the paddle. Now, I'm going to just show you in the main frame. One thing I did here was I actually added a border. So if I right click and get the properties of the frame, or get the properties of this drawing area, you'll see that it used to be none, but I've changed it to line border. And if I scroll down, you'll see that I have made the size of this drawing area. I've made it 600 wide by 400 high. And that makes it easier to control what's going on in the window and to know where the ball is at any given time. So that was from the frame, get the properties of the drawing area, and then I set the preferred size of the drawing area, and I said I want a border, so I see a line around the border. That's all I have to do in the frame. The rest of this code is going to all be done in the drawing area. So I've made some adjustments to my top, left, right, and bottom settings because with the left side is the edge of the border, and that's 0. That's 0 pixels away from the border. The right side is going to be, the panel is 600 wide, but I don't want the ball to bounce outside the panel. So I've done 600 pixels wide minus the initial ball diameter, which is 20. So that's 580. The top is 0, and the bottom is 400 minus the initial diameter, so 380. I've added in player X and player Y coordinates for the paddle. So I'm going to start the player X coordinate at 560. That's the top left corner of the rectangle. And I'm going to start the player Y at 0, so the very top. And then my paddle is 30 pixels wide and 100 pixels high. You can adjust that as you like. We've also added a Boolean array called the keys, and it keeps track of whether or not a key has been pressed or not. And we do this because that will allow you to keep your finger down on the key and not have to repeatedly move it to get it to move. So if you hold it down, it'll move. If you let go, it won't move. So we need to use that. And then we've got an integer called current key, which is the key that was pressed, and we use that to figure out what to do. Now we're adding a new class inside our drawing area class. It's called AL, and it extends the key adapter. So extends means adds extra features to key adapter. Key adapter is a library of routines that deal with pressing keys. We are adding to that functionality so our own game will work. We're going to do an override because we want to add our own behaviors in. And then we're going to have a method called key pressed. Now, we're overriding the key pressed method. Key pressed method is a very standard method inside the key adapter. We're overriding it with our own code. So in this this is what's going to happen when we press a key down. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the key code of the key that we pressed. Now, this is just a diagnostic line, so you can see on the screen on your console what's going on when you press a key. You don't need to have this once you've got it working the way you want. Now, I'm going to just use the up and down keys. They are called VK up and VK down. VK, I believe, means virtual keyboard. So these are codes that we use for the up and down arrows. I've added the W and S for you as well if you'd like to use those, but you don't need to use them for what we're doing. I'm going to remove this, we don't need this anymore. So what happens is if you press the up button, I'm going to set the 0th position in the key array to true, which means the up button has been pressed. If I press the down button, I'm going to set the down button array location to a true, which means the down button's been pressed. Now, below that, we've now got a key released method that overrides. And what happens is, if I let go of the up button, I'm going to set that up button location, or that up key location in the array to false. Same thing for down. If I let go of the down key, I set the down keys array location to false. So, and again, you don't need to use these unless you want to use W and S as your keys. Okay, now let's look back in our constructor here. We have to add some things. We've added this statement, set focusable true, and that means that the drawing area panel is where the action's happening. So key presses and mouse events will get caught in that panel because it's focused. Then we add the key listener to the drawing area. So that's now a listener looking for key presses. This whole structure here is used to grab mouse events so that we can, when we move out of the drawing area and adjust the sliders, if you do that, if you don't track the mouse events, if you press the keys to move the paddle, it won't move because the drawing area isn't focusable. So we're using this structure here to make it so we can track mouse events. So then down here, we've got a method called process at mouse event. So we grab the mouse event called E, and we look to see if we've used the mouse entered event, which means you move the mouse back into the drawing area. If that's the case, you request focus. So that means that the focus is now back on the drawing area, which means you can move the paddle. Now going to the modifications to the paint component, I am here just drawing my paddle. So I'm just drawing a dark gray paddle, rectangle that's my paddle. It's at the X and Y, the top left corner, and it's that many pixels wide and that many pixels high. And then the rest of it is just our ball bounce methods, or ball bounce code. We've had to add some code to the timer listener. If you want to get key presses and deal with moving something, it happens inside timer listener. I would strongly recommend you not put this code for the player's actions in the paint component. So when the timer fires, if the up arrow is true, so if you press the up arrow and your player's Y is less than 0, so you're not already at the top of the screen, go ahead and subtract 10 from your player's Y component. And then if you've pressed the down button, if that's true, and you're less than 299, the top of the paddle is less than 299, that means that you are not at the bottom of the screen yet. So the bottom is 400, but the bottom for the paddle is in relation to its top. So we have to take 400 minus 100, which is 300, and then we subtract one more. And that's just so we don't get the paddle stuck. You'll have to play around with that eventually a bit, but largely that'll mean the paddle won't get stuck at the bottom of the page. And then we just do our repaint. And that's all the code we need to make a paddle that will now move up and down. So I'll now play it. So you'll notice that the ball is now nicely bouncing on the border of the drawing area. And now if I use my down arrow, I can move my paddle up and down. And what you're seeing here in the console is just those diagnostic print line statements that show me what event was being, what key event and key released, key pressed events were being happening. So again, once you got those working, you can take those commands out. Okay. Now I haven't got any code to try and bounce the ball with the paddle yet, so that doesn't work. And eventually I'm going to add in scoring, and I'm going to let the ball pass. If it's a miss of the paddle, it will pass through and start again. But what I can do is if I go here, I can change my Y speed. I can change my X speed. So now it's just straight up and down. And now I can pull my X speed up too, and now it's faster. And I can change my diameter. Now you'll notice as I'm doing the diameter that it's not necessarily stopping exactly on the edges anymore. If you care about that, you're going to have to add some adjustment calculations in based on the diameter of the ball rather than just based on the starting 20 value that we use in the global variable setup. And I can set my key, my color of my ball. Now, if I did not have that mouse event to look for the mouse entered event, I would not be able to move that paddle back up and down. It would just sit there. But because I looked for the mouse event, mouse entered, it refocused that panel, and now I can move the paddle up and down. So that's as far as we're going to take it with this lesson. And the next lesson, we will start figuring out when the ball hits the paddle to see if we can score. So what we'll do eventually is we'll have it that every time you catch the ball, that's a score for you. And every time the ball misses, you miss the ball, it goes by, that's a score for the game. So we'll pick that up later. Thank you very much.